thatched cottages, the local shop, quaint church spires, and games on the green.
Catch it!
The sights and sounds of the classic village scene.
Everyone has their idea of the perfect village. I know I do.
But I've lived in a village for almost 40 years.
Come on, girls!
And I know there's more to village life than the picture postcard suggests. So I'm setting off again to explore the world of our smallest communities.
Don't you envy me?
I'll travel by land, by water, and by air.
Heavens above!
To find the characters and communities that have made a big impact.
Villages are fascinating places with rich histories and communities that have changed over time.
My window on the past is the Batsford Guides, whose words and pictures from the 1930s tell a story of village life. But I want to find out what it means to be a village today.
Oh, they're going to throw him into the sea.
And discover just why we're so passionate about this quintessentially British institution.
Beautiful, isn't it?
There are more than 10,000 villages up and down the country, and they come in many guises. Nestled by the sea, mining villages in the hills, and farming communities in the open fields. My Batsford Guides captured this rich diversity with their evocative artwork, depicting village features so recognisable to us all. So I've come to a region which has an abundance of those village characteristics, all set in a landscape that is close to my heart.
I always think the most amazing thing about this country is the fact that every county is different. If you look out here, you could only be in one place. Sussex, the Downs. I love them. I've known this part of the country all my life. It's amazingly underdeveloped and also stunningly beautiful.
My journey will take me across East Sussex and Kent in search of the village landmarks celebrated in the Batsford Guides. The welcoming sign, the respectful war memorial, the country garden, and even the most English of sports, cricket. These village symbols often provide an insight into our history, traditions, and our nation's unique eccentricity. And I can't wait to find out more. I'm starting my journey in the heart of Sussex, just north of the Downs, in a village which encapsulates that eccentricity. It even brought them something highly prized by any village, a truly distinctive and unmissable annual event.
The occasion is the Cuckfield Donkey Races, and for those who don't know it, Cuckfield in Sussex is the Ascot of the donkey worm.
The annual donkey races were a great charitable money spinner for Cuckfield. Villager Carol was a regular spectator, while Sue and Christine actually competed as donkey jockeys.
As a rider, it was such fun. We came from the pony club, we were a whole gang of us, and we'd all be, you know, waving our elbows and kicking our legs to get these donkeys to move.
Yeah. Sue had a wonderful way of getting them to go.
How did you do it?
I had my father's old Holborn tobacco tin with some dried peas in it and kept shaking it. And they really responded to it.
They're off, and down the 2-furlong course they thunder. Well, trot, anyway. Stirrups are not allowed, so unrehearsed incidents like this are just part of the sport.
If I made it to the end, I was really happy, because a lot of people fell off. I did come second or third, I can't quite remember.
And what was the prize money?
I didn't actually get the money, the owner got the money.
Oh, I think that's
gosh!
By the way, as everything goes to charity, the officials don't get paid. But as you can see, the job has its compensations. No wonder the sport's becoming so popular.
I am now in the middle of the racecourse.
That's
Yes,
right,
that's-
indeed,
yes.
yes. And there would have been crowds and crowds of people here. There were anything up to 10,000.
So why did it stop?
Well, unfortunately, this piece of land was taken over by the district council for the playing fields that are here now.
Since 1965, Cookfield has been without its great pageant. But the villagers turned their anger at the council into something quite ingenious. From Malta to the Maldives, everyone in the 60s was leaving the British Empire. So, Cookfield decided to do just that. Hot on the heels of Rhodesia, the villagers of Cookfield declared their independence. Now, this was all very tongue-in-cheek, but it paved the way for future fundraising. The independent state of Cookfield would have an elected mayor. Villagers could vote for a candidate as many times as they liked, but each vote would cost money. It's a gloriously crooked system that has elected Martin Ingridson and pub landlord Rob Helliwell.
Mr. Mayor, nice to see you.
Nice to meet you.
So congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much.
Are you very proud to be part of this wonderfully corrupt organisation?
Oh, I'm incredibly proud to be part of it. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's the most corrupt thing I've ever been part of.
Oh, well...
It's very enjoyable.
Now, Martin, all this money goes to what?
So all the money from all the candidates comes in, and it is then redistributed out to the local community. This year we donated to over 30 different organisations within the local area.
Did it cost you a lot?
Well, it cost me £4,200 is what we raised.
Brilliant.
Not a record, but it was enough that year to get myself elected. Yeah.
You didn't serve them unless they filled your
Well,
coffers?
exactly. It was shake the tin in front, or there's no beers poured for you today.
It's time for me to leave the independent state of Cookfield. What a terrific story. Bravo to the villagers for keeping their charitable work alive with this wonderfully corrupt election. Oh, sad about the donkey races. I'd like to have seen those.
I'm heading 19 miles southeast, back over the downs, to an area whose beauty is believed to have inspired the words to a classic English hymn. Morning has broken. It was children's author and local resident Eleanor Fargen who wrote the words to this very familiar song in 1931. But the song isn't the only thing that's familiar to me. I've passed this way before, as I'm sure many of you have too.
Batsford describes Alfriston as one of Sussex's professional beauties, and it certainly is. I suppose it really is quintessential English village. You see the marvellous half-timbered buildings. But the giveaway as to where we are is the Sussex flint. Beautiful.
The chalk of the South Downs is very porous, so the local seams of flint have long been used as a building material. You can see it around Alfriston's Market Cross. And even at the 14th century clergy house, the first property acquired by the National Trust in 1896.
I used to come to Alfriston in the 50s. I was at school in Seaford, and on Saturdays we would walk over the downs to Alfriston. It seemed like miles to me. But it hasn't changed in centuries. It's still so beautiful.
Alfriston is a star attraction of our newest national park, and I could happily while away hours here. But on this occasion I've come to see its less well-known coastal neighbour, if I can find it. I'm travelling a few miles west in search of Telscombe. A single-track, dead-end road is the only route to the village, where its 40 residents and an inspiring story hide amongst the downs.
Hello, chicken. A Victorian letterbox. But there's still a collection. 4 o'clock, Monday to Friday, 9:45 Saturday.
The enduring charm and utter detachment of this village is the great legacy of one man, Ambrose Gorham. A successful bookmaker and racehorse trainer, he moved here to Stud Farm in the late 1800s. The local downland was perfect for keeping his racing stock in tip-top shape. And in 1902, he hit the big time. His horse, Shannon Lass, won the Grand National. Gorham then channeled his wealth and energies into his tiny rural community. Margaret Botting has lived here for the last 45 years.
Most people have been here over 30 years. We don't move on.
Now, when Gorham came here, it was just a little tiny village.
It was an extremely poor community, and he took the village under his wing. He brought water to the village because there was no water here. Wow. Everybody drank the rainwater that came off their roofs. He brought electricity into the village.
Gosh, that must have been very expensive.
He used his winnings from the Grand National. He put money to refurbish the church, which was not the done thing, that the church should receive money from a gambler.
They accepted.
And they accepted.
Good for them.
Buildings all around Telscombe received a Gorham-funded refurbishment. But every good village needs a village hall. So, in 1924, Gorham built one. This building remains his most tangible legacy. But inside, I'm going to see a less obvious one.
Anyone at home?
It seems Ambrose Gorham was quite the amateur photographer. Local resident and artist Alan Baker has long been fascinated by a set of photos Gorham took in 1904.
Oh, look at them. All in there.
Yeah, these are amazing.
Gorham set out to create a visual record of his tiny village. Something that would have been almost unheard of in the early 1900s.
Almost every photograph has a shadow. It's a bit like Alfred Hitchcock. And we assume that's Gorham.
There he is. How wonderful.
To mark the centenary of Gorham's project, Alan helped capture life in Telscombe once again.
One of the amazing things about this record is that in 100 years, from 1904 to 2004, almost nothing's changed. The only difference is in 1904, they would all dress up, of course. Today, we're so used to being photographed, we just go out and do it.
Have I got to have my photograph taken, Dad? No.
The lack of change in Telscombe is a lasting testament to Ambrose Gorham. When he died in 1933, he left his many properties and hundreds of acres to a trust. Its job was to maintain Telscombe's rural characteristics, something the great man was passionate about.
I think Gorham was right, you see. Look over there. Yes, I know that's the sea, but also all those houses are called Telscombe Cliffs. In Gorham's later years, a lot of this coastline was being gobbled up by property developers wanting to put yet more and more houses here. Well, Gorham didn't want that for Telscombe. So, all these years on, his village is still as he would have liked it.
Hurrah for good old Ambrose Gorham. Next, I'm heading into the Weald, where I'll be visiting a village from the top order of world cricket.
W.G. Grace. Boom.
And I'll be dropping in on one of Sussex's biggest characters.
Sitting in full evening dress with a roast chicken in one hand and a glass of claret in the other.
I'm travelling through the far southeast of our country, a region that boasts no shortage of classic village features. But in the heart of Sussex, I've reached an area that has always been sparsely populated. The Weald.
Weald is the old English word that means woodland. What a view. Amazing. I'm looking about 30 miles south. Typical Weald and Downs landscape. There's the Weald and the Downs in the background.
My first stop in the Weald is typical of the area. West Hoathly, a small village set high on a ridge. The highest point of all is the church of St. Margaret's.
Down in the valley there would have been loads and loads of trees. And so the ridge would have been the place for communities to settle. Much drier because, of course, where all the woodland was would have been very, very boggy.
So here, West Hoathly started, and all the traditional village features can still be found close by.
Beautiful church. Pub where you can go to after you've been to church. And just down the road there's a priest's house. Same as Alfriston.
But I've come to see another aspect of West Hoathly, a country garden. Now, many villages have these, but Gravetye Manor, you could say, has the original.
Wow! Isn't that glorious? Beautiful sky, bird song, all this colour. Magic.
The gardens at Gravetye are the creation of Irishman William Robinson, a lowly garden boy who rose through late Victorian society to become one of the most respected voices in the horticultural world.
Robinson's philosophy of gardening was probably best summed up by the title of one of his books. It was called The Wild Garden. He loved this profusion of colour and everything all intertwined. Look at the forget-me-nots with the tulips and in among everything. Glorious.
Robinson rejected the strict planting patterns and stifling formality of Victorian displays.
He couldn't abide topiary. He called it cruelty to hedges.
Instead, he pioneered the natural, unfussy look that we all now associate with rural gardens. But until he made his fortune and bought Gravetie, Robinson's vision only existed in his books. This was his chance to put his gardening philosophy into practice. And how? Robinson poured 50 years of love and hard work into the Gravetie Gardens, reaching the grand age of 96 before he died in 1935. Gravetie is now a luxury hotel, and guests come from all over the world to enjoy a garden that is forever England. Forever England, but brought to us by an Irishman. From horticulture to literature, further east in the Weald is the village of Burwash, which was the much-loved home of another of this area's great sons. The man who wrote the Jungle Book has brought pleasure to millions, but his contribution to village life is rather less well known. It's the timeless war memorial.
Ah, there you are. One name is very familiar. Lieutenant John Kipling, son of Rudyard Kipling, who lived just down the road.
In August 1914, the famous author had been instrumental in arranging for his 17-year-old son to join the British Army. 13 months later, John Kipling was killed at the Battle of Lewes. In the Great War's aftermath, Rudyard channeled his grief into becoming an active member of the War Graves Commission.
It was Kipling who chose some of our most memorable war engravings, like this one. Their name liveth forevermore. That was a quote from the Bible. He also chose the simple message on the cenotaph in London: the glorious dead.
Burwash's own memorial was erected in 1920, with one most unusual feature: a lantern at the top, which to this day is lit to mark the anniversary of the death of each villager commemorated. Through happy and sad times, Burwash was a place that Kipling loved. In 1902, he bought Bateman's, a fabulous Jacobean country house on the edge of the village. Already the most celebrated author of the day, this was where he could avoid attention and be inspired by the Wealden landscape. I'm meeting house manager Gary Enston to find out what Kipling was really like.
All the portraits, very Victorian, rather stern, but was he a jolly fellow?
Oh yeah, he was completely the anti-Victorian, Edwardian sort of stern figure that you probably think he is, actually. He was very much a sort of childlike figure trapped in a man's body, and he would go on adventures up and down the river or out on hunts in the woods and things like that. And so Yes, he could be a very professional soul, as it were, but I think in an odd kind of way he actually preferred to be a big kid, really, and that was his life.
Now, that sounds like the fantastical character who came up with the Just So stories and the Jungle Book. When visiting someone's home, there's one thing that's guaranteed to reveal a good deal about the owner: the visitor's book.
Gosh. November the 2nd, 1909, Henry James. December the 28th, Heath Robinson. Sir Ernest Shackleton. T.E. Shaw. Lawrence of Arabia to you and me. Oh, and at the end, seen another one? Mr. and Mrs. Kermit Roosevelt.
Among the famous names, one appears regularly, that of Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin.
29th of January, 23rd to the 26th, and down here on the 27th to the 29th. But then you see, Baldwin was Kipling's cousin. Isn't it wonderful? I do hope people are carrying on with visitors' books, because they are a marvellous history of the time. Forgive me, I could go on reading this forever.
At Bateman's, you really do enter Kipling's world. He left the house and its land to the National Trust, who for 75 years now have preserved it. Just so.
This is the really exciting bit. The desk splattered with ink. Reminds me a bit of my desk at school. The inkwell. He used to scratch the titles of his books onto it. And if you look very carefully, you see the Jungle Book. And of course, The View. So when he had writer's block, which I'm sure he never did, he could look up and see the glorious Sussex countryside. Marvellous.
The landscape around Burwash has changed very little since Kipling's day. But travel back further to the 1600s, and this quiet valley thronged with the sounds of heavy industry. The Weald was Britain's industrial heartland, a vast iron industry that forged the guns and cannon of the nation's ships and forts. It's a history that enchanted Kipling. Whilst he was writing Puck of Pook's Hill, I'm sure he took a stroll here to imagine the sights and sounds of what was Burwash Forge.
Many a night has his big trip hammer shook me in my bed here. Bumpety, bumpety. If the wind was east, I could hear Master Tom Collins' forge at Stockens, another village, answering his brother. Bump, bump. Yes, the valley was as full of forges and fineries as a Mayshall cuckoo's. All gone to grass now. Grass, trees, nature has returned and reclaimed.
The Weald and iron industry brought great riches to the Burwash area, particularly the Fuller family. They settled in the tiny neighbouring village of Brightling. John Fuller was an eccentric MP in the early 1800s, known affectionately as Mad Jack. With the iron industry gone, his great talent was the spending of his family's fortune. I'm sure he regarded these follies, which he built around Brightling, as entirely necessary. A character like Jack Fuller simply can't be ignored. My guide certainly didn't.
Jack Fuller was a man of great size. In the House of Commons, he was known as the hippopotamus. Offered a peerage by Pitt, he threw the letter in the fire, remarking, Jack Fuller I was born, and Jack Fuller I will die. Good old Jack.
And Mad Jack was certainly determined to live up to his name.
Heavens.
A whole 2 decades before his death, Jack decided to build himself a final resting place, which now has some woolly guardians.
You're beautiful. No, I haven't got anything for you, but you're very lovely. I was told to expect this, but nothing quite prepares you for the sight of a 25-foot-high pyramid in the middle of a Sussex village churchyard. Legend has it that Jack Fuller is buried in here, sitting in full evening dress with a roast chicken in one hand and a glass of claret in the other.
So Mad Jack lives up to his reputation.
And as Batsford says, the claret will be past its best.
And I'd be inclined to steer clear of the chicken, too. I'm off to delve deeper into a classic village pastime. One I'm particularly batty about myself.
Let's hope one of these will win the Ashes.
And I hop aboard a steam train bound for Kent.
Reminds me of my childhood.
I'm in East Sussex, visiting the varied villages of the Downs and the Weald. And I'm getting close to the Kent border. This being summer, the village greens are full of a favourite activity. It's believed that the earliest form of cricket appeared right here in the Kent-Sussex borders, the best part of 1,000 years ago. More recently, one local village has played a leading role in taking the game to the world: Robertsbridge.
I'm looking for a place that was the home of the English cricket bat, a name which all you cricket fans would know. Yes, there it is, look. L.J. Nichols Limited. It's not a shop anymore, but you can see the same 2 doors. It's definitely the same building, isn't it?
Levi J. Nichols was a local carpenter who, in 1856, made a cricket bat for his brother. It must have been a very good bat, because almost 160 years later, cricket bats are still made in Robertsbridge. The business has since moved just round the corner and changed its name to Gray Nichols.
Oh, this is wonderful, look. October the 6th, 1895. Dear Sir, I used one of your bats at Hastings in 1894 and I scored 131. I used it when I made my 100th century and scored 1,000 runs in May with it. Unbelievable. So I think I may call it my record bat. Yours truly, W.G. Grace. Boom. Wonderful.
Gray Nichols is now a global business, producing 60,000 bats a year. But out in the Robertsbridge workshop, little seems to have changed. I imagine W.G. Grace would find much of this scene very familiar.
Now you're working on a new bat.
Yes. It's all English willow. We grow all our own willows for our cricket bats, and basically they're grown all over the country, from literally outside the factory right up to places in Yorkshire where we grow willow as well.
And is that a great selling point, that it's English willow?
Oh, very much so. We have factories in Australia and in India, and all the willow comes through Robertsbridge.
Here.
So the wood hasn't changed, and neither has the way it's crafted.
This is a very old tool, the draw knife, made in the 1930s by a company called Braids, English company, pre-war. It's probably my favourite tool. You would use it to draw off large amounts of wood to get the general shape.
Another important feature of the bat is balance. This is obtained in the shaping, and it's done almost entirely by eye and feel. Very highly skilled work indeed.
Today, the vast majority of Gray Nichols bats are produced overseas. But here in Robertsbridge, the world's best cricketers come to Chris to have their bats made just the way they like them.
For each of my players, I have notes on their particular requirements.
Where?
In my little book here.
It's black, I see.
It is a little black book.
Yes.
So if we have a look here, you can see I've got several players' names, like Nick Compton here and Shiv Chanderpaul, and I keep notes of all the different details so that I remember how to make their cricket bats. For example, Alistair Cook, who I've got in here, he's actually quite straightforward to make for, but over the few years I've been making for him, his weight on his bat has gone up to £2.10. He was originally about 2.8½, so over the years he's using a heavier bat.
In this modern world of Hawkeye and the marvellous snickometer, it seems that for bats, the old way is still the best.
All this wonderful willow cut into 2-foot 10-inch lengths, waiting to be turned into cricket bats. It's lovely to know that a worldwide cricket brand is still here in a small village in Sussex where it began. Let's hope one of these will win the Ashes.
Just east of Robertsbridge, and I reached the county border. And lo and behold, a new village feature appears. One that is unquestionably Kentish.
Oast houses, those wonderful roofs that you see, they always look a bit crazy to me with that funny bit on the top. That goes round in the wind. They're used for drying the hops. It's fun to count each one as you go through the landscape. I love them.
Sadly, a functioning oast house is as rare as hen's teeth these days. But they're a reminder of a crop that, until just a few decades ago, was big business round here. Nowhere more so than outside the walls of Bodiam Castle. The picture book fortress and the tiny Bodiam village were once surrounded by 850 acres of hops, the largest area of hop farms in the country. And in 1900, work began on a railway that would connect Bodiam's hop fields to the outside world.
Our last round trip, Tenterton and back, 2:20. That's a good time. Why are steam trains so romantic? Hello? Oh, it's beautiful. Are we in first class?
As the hop industry went into a sharp decline, the Kent and East Sussex Railway closed in 1961, but only for 13 years.
Don't you envy me?
Since then, it's become a very popular visitor attraction.
Here we go. Marvellous noise, reminds me of my childhood.
the ideal way of taking in the Rother Valley.
And there's the castle. It looks glorious. I suppose all this would have been solid hops 70 years ago. Extraordinary. I am now definitely in Kent.
Good afternoon. Would you like tea and some cakes there?
Oh, I'd love it. Thank you very much. Oh, what a treat. Tea out of a teapot with a jug. Oh. This is a lovely way to finish a train journey. No automatic doors here. That was wonderful.
As the sign suggests, Tenterton is very much a town, so I'm obliged to reacquaint myself with my car and press on to Kentish villages. Most of this county, like Sussex, was thickly wooded and sparsely populated. Growing crops and grazing animals was difficult, so the early settlers had to remove trees to create woodland pastures, or, as they were known here, dens.
We think of the den as somewhere enclosed. Oh, it's my little den. One made dens as a child. But of course, the Old English word meant it was a clearing.
Some of those clearings are now the area's prettiest villages. Smarden, Rolvenden, Bethersden, and the stunning Benenden. It was young George VI who once proposed that the great British motorist would benefit from a revival of village signs. The Daily Mail promptly ran a sign competition, which it seems this part of the world took very seriously.
Biddenden was Bidder's den. Bidder was an old Kentish lady, I think.
Biddenden's unusual wrought iron sign scooped one of the competition prizes back in 1920, and behind it lies a rather delightful tale, as my Batsford guide reveals.
The village has crazy paving, leaning half-timbered cottages, a row of black and white almshouses, and above all, an attractive legend on which it thrives. Here lived England's first recorded Siamese twins, the Biddenden Maids. So devoted were they that when one died, the other refused to be severed from her sister, an operation that would have saved her life. But when they died, they left a legacy.
For 8 centuries, the annual distribution of the dole has been given to the poor of the village. The cost is taken from land left by the twins.
At Easter time, the poor and needy would receive a loaf of bread, a pound of cheese, and a nice packet of tea. Isn't it an enchanting story?
Next, I reach the Kent coast, where I learn of the heroic defence put up by a village with its very own castle.
Because it was a defeat. We don't talk about it.
We don't.
And I'll visit a seaside hangout with some well-known fans.
Adam Faith, Petula Clark, and the Beatles.
I've reached the final leg of my journey through the villages of East Sussex and Kent. Today, I'm off to the coast. The North Kent coast, to be precise. But on the way, there's a village with the strongest of maritime connections. The once bustling village of Upnor.
In days gone by, this street had a butcher's, a baker's and grocer's, a post office, and 4 pubs. Not many people, are there? But look at this wonderful weatherboarding. Cobbles. I love cobbles, as long as you're not wearing heels, of course. But the fascinating thing about this village, the only way to get out of it until the 20th century was by boat.
Life in Upnor has always been dominated by the Medway estuary. In fact, the name Upnor started out as Uppenor, meaning on the bank.
Now, over there, just upstream, it was the site of the Royal Docks at Chatham. So for centuries, you'd have seen the Royal Naval ships sail up here majestically, past that slight bend, the 10 miles up to the mouth of the Medway, and on to conquer the seas.
The Royal Navy left here for good in 1984. But the Medway is far from quiet. I've been invited to the Yacht Club to take to the water with club historian John Basley.
I first came here in 1952. I joined the club 55 and I'm still a member.
Good for you.
John has insisted I join him on the water for one very good reason.
This is Upnor Castle.
Yeah, that's right.
You can't see Upnor Castle from Upnor village.
You can't, it's hidden away from the main village. It was built about 1567 for Queen Elizabeth to defend the dockyard, which was further up the river in Tudor days.
Right. It looks in very good condition.
It is. You can see the gun emplacements on the lower bastion.
This castle has one great claim to fame. It's the only coastal fortress in the country to have fired a shot in anger. In 1667, a Dutch raiding party made an audacious assault on the royal dockyard. The English at the time were reeling from plague and the Great Fire of London and were caught totally off guard.
The Dutch made off with the Royal Charles.
And the Royal Charles was an important ship.
Oh, it was the flagship of the Navy at the time, yeah. So it was an important trophy for them, let's put it that way.
The firepower of Upnor Castle was the only real resistance the Dutch met. And it was just enough to halt their assault on the Royal Dockyard.
Was this the darkest time of the British Navy?
Well, it was certainly a major wake-up call.
We know so little about this raid. I suppose because it was a defeat, we don't talk about it.
We don't. We did have a celebration in 1967.
Oh, really?
And the Dutch came over with yachts and all the rest of it.
Oh, lovely. That's gorgeous.
Despite the Royal Navy's departure, Upnor's modern maritime community seems in rude health. John's Yacht Club stages races every weekend. And today is having an open day. Fortunately, there's not a Dutch invader in sight.
Nice way to spend a Sunday, sitting up here from this fantastic viewpoint. I can see, boats upon boats upon boats. One must remember we're an island nation. And there's nothing so good as messing about in boats. Or actually, looking at people messing about in boats, I think is best.
Further along the North Kent coast, perched on cliffs overlooking the Thames estuary, is the seemingly unassuming village of Birchington-on-Sea.
In the 1800s, a new phenomenon arrived: seaside tourism. The Victorians, with their urban lives and new railways, couldn't get enough.
The vast majority of Londoners headed straight to the far northeast corner of Kent, Margate.
As Batsford noted, there is a surprising lack of sophistication about London's most popular seaside resort. So, for sophistication, one had to come here, to Birchington-on-Sea.
And Batsford was right. For many years, this was the coastal spot to be seen in.
Just across there, beyond that gap in the cliffs, there was a hotel. Look, you can see it in the painting here. It was called the Beresford. Sadly, it was knocked down. But in its heyday, it played host to people such as Harold Wilson, John Betjeman, Adam Faith, Petula Clark, and the Beatles. Now, the defining feature of the hotel was not that it was beside the sea, but that it was a bungalow.
Birchington-on-Sea deserves to be known as the home of the Great British Bungalow. In fact, I've come to see the country's first ever bungalow estate. Started as early as 1877 and set on top of the cliffs, it really was quite a development.
Hello.
Birchington resident Tim Setchell has agreed to show me inside one of these groundbreaking homes.
Gosh, what a wonderful entrance hall.
These original bungalows were aimed at gentlemen of position and leisure. They were the brainchild of John Pollard Seddon, an architect who'd witnessed the rush of visitors to Margate and resolved to create a new seaside destination for the more discerning visitor.
Oh, that's extraordinary, in the middle of the house.
Yep, a strange octagonal entrance hall in the middle of the house, and there, yes.
What a corridor! Oh, it's the looking glass at the end.
It is, but it's pretty long.
It's long,
just gives you some idea of the hugeness, the size of this bungalow.
This is not a bungalow to me.
No, it is a tower bungalow. The word bungalow comes from the word bungala from India, and they were very large houses with long sloping roofs, and the eaves hung over the edge to keep the sun out. And this is exactly what this is.
What we think of as a bungalow today, that staple of seaside village life, is far removed from this grand design from the days of the Raj. Only 4 of these original bungalows survive, but their grandeur is still evident.
Another wonderfully shaped room. Glorious.
This was where London's great and good could escape for summer weekends. And with such a start in life, Birchington could now be famous as the home of second homes. Well, I'm pleased to say that it isn't. Rather, it's a thriving family community, never more so than at the village family fun day.
Hello. Hello. Just wondering if the bird wants a sausage. These are all people from the village with the children. Wonderful. That's what villages are about. I said at the beginning of my journey that I knew this neck of the woods rather well. I spent my school days at Seaford in Sussex, and I've known areas of Sussex all my life, and a bit of Kent too. I've seen medieval villages, Alfriston, and places like this, Birchington, where this village only got going after the railway arrived.
Caught between London and the continent, Kent and Sussex have always been abuzz with activity. But that history has produced communities that are as varied as any I've seen. I set out to learn about classic village features, and there's been no shortage of those. But they've revealed a host of stories that have shaped the communities around them. I didn't know my own garden owes a debt to an Irishman, or that Rudyard Kipling helped give us the War Memorial. And it's been fascinating to learn about great benefactors like Ambrose Gorham in Telscombe, and the legend of the Biddenden Maids.
Wonderful that these legacies should endure after all this time. But then, that's villages for you.